Welcome back to the Badass Lifter podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking about if gyms are a welcoming environment or if the environment holds people back from starting their lifting journey in the first place. And is gym and fitness culture toxic? We're going to be talking about this from an online perspective and also what the gym environment is like in person, because I think it's important to distinguish between the two because we're going to talk about in this episode, they're very different. And when we talk about, I see things online that are like, fitness industry is damaging or that it's like inherently toxic or not a welcoming place. And I think when we're talking about this, it's important to distinguish between like the fitness industry online as well as like someone's experience going to the gym, which I think is very, very different. I want to share my experience with this. So I have trained in dozens of different gyms across the country at this point. Um, Gyms made with powerlifters and bodybuilders in mind, gyms made specifically for athletes, and also like budget gyms made for just like regular population people who just want to be fit and active. High end, low end, the gym that I'm at right now definitely seems like it's for bodybuilders in mind. That's not my focus, but the people who go there and like the equipment that they have definitely seems like these are people who want to actually like get on stage and compete in a bodybuilding show. I've seen a lot of different gyms at this point. I'm also going to refer to like the experience I've had with a lot of the lifters that I've worked with. Some of them train at home, but some of them train in like, high end, low end gyms. And I've worked with hundreds of people at this point at different ages, training levels, goals, body types, etc. And I think bringing the experience I've had with them and them talking about what their gym environment is like is also going to be really helpful for this conversation. Let's talk about in person first. And an in person gym experience, 99% of the time, is going to be you go in to work out, you maybe you have a plan, maybe you don't. You have your music in, you kind of do your plan, everyone leaves you alone, and you head out. Like that's going to be almost all of your experiences in the gym. Um, Sometimes you might have to ask for a spot or someone might ask for some help on something. Like maybe over time you make some friends there and like do some small talk, things like that. Like that can happen as you like get used to the gym over time. I think people see the gym as very intimidating at first, but once they get through, like 3, 4, 5 sessions, they kind of realize that it's really a place where people tend to leave each other alone. They kind of ignore each other. And everyone's just kind of really focused on what they're focusing on. And this has been my experience for almost all gym environments, like regardless if we're talking about like people who are top powerlifters or just like someone who's trying to train to be fit and healthy. And that's going to be most of your gym experiences. Again, like 99% of the time. If people are judging, it is incredibly passive and so passive to the point where like in times that I thought someone was judging, I don't actually have any proof. Like they didn't say anything or do anything. And it was probably mostly like me thinking it, but not actually something that was going on. Now, are there bad interactions that can happen in a gym environment? For sure. I have had bad interactions. The lifters that I've worked with have told me about bad interactions, and we've kind of worked through those. But those bad interactions do not happen very often for most people. Um, I think social media has kind of ruined us in a way where we hear about a lot of bad experiences that happen in the gym. Those experiences can be true. Sometimes they're exaggerated for social media purposes, but they're very infrequent. And I don't want someone judging how the gym environment is when you might go 100 times and you might have one bad experience. And just from talking to lifters that I've worked with, they have had some bad experiences before. Someone was weird around them or made a weird comment or, did something that made them feel uncomfortable. But like these are few and far in between. And I've had lifters I've worked with who've had zero experiences and have been in the gym for years. A lot of them felt uncomfortable at first in the gym, which is totally fair and valid. And we talked through that. But it just doesn't happen as often as I think the online world makes it seem. And I don't want someone never to go into the gym thinking that this is going to be like, a weekly or monthly event. If it does happen, it happens very infrequently. And if it's really, really inappropriate, honestly, you can just like go to the manager and they'll get kicked out. And I think this is one of the reasons it doesn't happen as often as you might think is forget like, yes, everyone is nice people and empathetic and sympathetic and all that kind of stuff. But honestly, like no one wants to make someone uncomfortable in the gym because they don't want to lose their gym membership. Like at the end of the day, they're like, yes, they want to work out, but they're not going to make people uncomfortable because if they do, they're going to get complaints to, the head office or the manager at that gym or whatever, and they're going to lose their gym membership. So, people try to be decently polite, has been my experience in the gym. There are bad people. There are people who, end up, I've worked at a gym for years and we did have to kick some members out because they were being inappropriate. That does happen. But again, like we're talking about like 1 out of 200, 300, if I had to just like throw a random number out there. So it happens and it's bad when it happens and we should call it out when it happens. It's just like not the normal experience in my opinion. And I'm sharing the experience both of the lifters that I've worked with as well as like my own personal experience being in a variety of different gyms for over like 12, 13 years now. Now, there are some cons. It's not like all perfect in like the gym environment. And I want to talk about those as well. Is that fitness salespeople can be pretty pushy sometimes, both when you join the gym and even sometimes after that. It's annoying, and I don't actually know how effective it is. A lot of trainers are kind of forced into like a sales position, but they're not really salespeople. And so they often do things that are like weird in the gym and can be kind of like pushing training onto someone who doesn't actually want the training. And like that's a very real thing. I've seen it in the gym environment before. I don't think they like it either. I think they just think they like kind of have to be pushy to make those sales. But that can be a thing that happens, especially when you start going to the gym. Now, that tends to die down as you go to that gym more often. Like usually they're very salesy up front and become less salesy over time. They really try and push like buying their thing, whatever that thing is, like right at the beginning tends to be the strategy, but it's not always the case. Um, Another con is like the messaging in many of these places they're not very weight neutral in many cases. This is kind of changing where it's becoming more weight neutral, which I'm thrilled about because definitely when I started training, that was not the case. And I think like that's important to recognize is that like it was, very weight loss focused. Now it's becoming a more weight neutral. The gym that I'm in as of this recording is very bodybuilder focused and is not very weight neutral. I'm kind of the weird one in that space. But that's kind of one of the cons is that if you are trying to focus less on the weight on the scale, the people who are training tend not to be very weight neutral because weight neutral is kind of like a newer thing. And I'm the weird one and I acknowledge that. As well as like the messaging around tends not to be very weight neutral. So if that's, if you're listening to this podcast, maybe you want to be more weight neutral. Sometimes you're just going to have to like ignore the messaging that's in your gym because it's not the same as yours. If that makes sense. Another one, I think this is like something that I hope changes over time is like not all fitness equipment is built with like all body types in mind. I've, issues. I have clients who are on the shorter end where there's just certain pieces of equipment they can't use. Also people who are really tall seem to have the same problem. It seems like there's kind of like a perfect zone where like a lot of gym equipment is made for you. And then like kind of after that, like it can be very awkward. People in bigger bodies, same issues, especially when it comes to machines where like you have to kind of lock your legs in or depending on like how wide the seats are or large the seats are, stuff like that. Like it can definitely be an issue where like equipment wasn't made with everybody in mind. It was made for like a certain kind of person. And also some equipment is just made really poorly for everyone. Like I've been in some gyms and I was like, who made this? Because this was not tested on a person. So depending on what gym you go to, and if you're, let's call it like a body type that is not the norm, it could be worth trying out the equipment first, making sure it's actually comfortable for you. Because depending on what gym you go to and the budget that the gym has and what amount they put to inclusive equipment may or may not be right for you. So that's something to keep in mind. I've had some people who like they went to a gym and they're like they can't use half the machines. It happens. Something that I hope gyms improve on over time. They are making, I would say now they're getting better at making like more inclusive equipment. It's very slow and just starting, and also those tend to be at a higher price point as well. So a lot of gyms just like don't have them yet because they don't have the budget for it. Hopefully that will change over time, and that we can have equipment that includes more people. Yeah. So overall, this is like my thoughts on the in-person gym experience. 99% of the time, there are bad experiences, but these experiences are often not the norm or very few. And I don't want these to define like your full lifting experience, because they can be so uncommon depending on where you are that like they shouldn't ruin the whole experience, like full stop. And I'm not saying that when they happen that they're okay, but we should acknowledge that like they're also not, you're not going to go every day and have these experiences. Okay, so let's talk about the online part of fitness culture, because this is incredibly different from the in-person experience. And probably what I just talked about is probably not what you see on your feed on like Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, etc. So the pros is that like we have a lot of good free educational content online, and it can be inspirational. Like you can follow people that inspire you to do better, grow as a person, both in the gym and outside of the gym. And there are definitely good people to learn from that can be inspirational. They really do help people, both small accounts and large accounts. I like to think that I am part of this group that like really does help people and like can inspire you on your fitness journey. So that's like the pro. And very often these are people that if the online fitness world didn't work, you never would have known about them and wouldn't have got inspired by them, et cetera, et cetera. Not to brag about myself, but I know that there are people that I've worked with and currently work with who like may or may not have ever gone through the lifting experience had they never known me. That was only possible through online, as like kind of an example. So that's like a big pro, and that should be acknowledged right before we get into all the cons. Okay, so the cons of the fitness culture is that like your feed is unlikely showing you the normal bodies that you would see in the gym. So if I just like scroll through YouTube or Instagram or whatever, within a minute, I'm going to find someone who is incredibly, let's call toned, abs, very large muscle mass, way outside of the norm, and it's going to show up in most of my feed. um, I again currently train at like a gym that is bodybuilder focused. Like these are people who want to go on shows and are above average muscle mass. And I still are not close to some of the things that I've seen on my feed. Really insane stuff, like 0.1% of strength, 0.1% of, bodybuilder aesthetics, like way outside of the norm. This is not what's going to show up at your gym, almost for sure. Like I think like that's like you will not see these people. If you see these people, there's like one. And again, like I am training at a bodybuilder gym right now, and I have seen like two people who like might be comparable to the hundreds of people I've seen on my feed. And even like you're not being shown what is normally in the gym. Okay, like full stop. Second is that filming is super common online. Fitness content creators will often film their workouts, share them. They're talking in the gym, all that kind of thing. I have yet to see this in person. I have seen, the talking part I've yet to see. There are people who film. It's not as common. Like I do film in the gym, my exercises. I do for form reasons, as well as like showing people different exercises and kind of what I've been doing. I'll do that for like 1 or 2 minutes of my workout, and then I put my tripod away. And often I'm the only person filming. I think I've seen max ever 3 people filming at the same time in a big gym. And even that was like out of the norm. I am usually the only person filming in that gym. But if you go online, you're like, yeah, isn't everyone just like filming their workouts and sharing? And like, like people are in the background. They didn't ask to be on there. Not the case. the people who do film online, usually they're doing it in a way that's like they're getting their filming done as fast as possible. They're trying to include like no one in the background if they can, and it's very quick. And it's not just like they don't just have like a live stream going on like in a public gym. Like this is very uncommon. um Trained in dozens of gyms, just haven't seen it. And also the lifters that I've worked with haven't mentioned this when they film. For me, it's like you bring the phone out for 30 seconds, you do your squats real quick, you put it back. You try not to get anyone into the shot, which normally is something that is easy enough to do. um, yeah, filming is super common online, but it's not actually that common in like regular gym spaces, at least not that I've seen. um, Another con is that content is often misinformation. Lots of classic, like, it worked for me, it'll work for you, which I think we've talked about in previous episodes, but like very often fitness creators will do something and they see results and then they assume that that's like the best for everybody. And that's just like not the case. Or often it's like lies of omission. So an example is like, hey, here's my glute building workout or like chest building workout that got me the results that I got. And they won't mention, sometimes drug use, sometimes they'll use misleading angles, sometimes they've had surgery, sometimes, and also just like it's very unlikely that if you see someone who's incredibly muscular, that there was one workout that they did that actually got them there. At best, this is like the one of 50 different workouts they've done to get to where they are. But often the content will be like, yeah, I did this and this is how I got there. And it's like, it doesn't really work like that. Like I would love if I could just do like, here's the one workout program you need to deadlift 300 pounds. Like I would tell everybody, like it would be awesome. This is just like not the case. So lots of like lies of omissions that way, or sometimes just like straight up misinformation that exists online. And it can be hard to tell who is lying versus like who is giving out inspirational content. This is kind of like one of the cons of learning online. Another one um, is people call each other out a lot online, way more than in any gym scenario. So I post something online, threads, TikTok, Instagram, etc., and I will get people in the comments telling me that I'm wrong. Very often it's other trainers, which is interesting. Even more common than that, it's people who have no content, no profile photo, no content. Like they're just kind of a hater to be a hater. This happens a lot online. This almost never happens in person. I'm trying to think. I've been in the gym 12, 13 years now. I think I've had 5 interactions where like someone actually went up to me and told me I was doing something wrong. And like we're talking like, I don't know, thousands of workouts at this point. Like very, very uncommon. This happens a lot online. One of the reasons this happens online is because content where people are calling each other out actually just like reaches more people, like just because of the algorithm. And honestly, I think people like watching that content. Like people like watching drama. People don't actually like being in drama, as like kind of an example. And I think it's fun to see like your favorite trainer call out like another trainer, like that kind, that kind of thing. And so a lot of trainers do that because I think they feel that that's what they need to do to, you know, get the following, or like that kind of an example. But this just doesn't happen in the gym. It's very uncommon. I have seen even like things that I've seen in the gym that I'm like, that seems pretty wrong. Most often it's just like, oh, I don't think that's a good idea. And then I like go back to my workout, and that's 99% of interactions in the gym. And even the lifters that I've worked with, there have been people who have like interrupted their workout to like give them unsolicited advice, which is, even if they mean well, it's like pretty annoying. But again, like it happens once a year, maybe, um, if that. And you kind of just go on with your life after at that point. So, but it happens a lot online. So if you go online and you see all these people calling each other out, and you're like, well, if I go to the gym, are people going to call me out? It's like almost for sure not. Especially if you're not like a fitness content creator. Like it's just not something that you're going to run into issues as much. If you build a following online and then post your workouts, almost for sure you will get comments. But in the in-person environment, this is just like not the case. Yeah, I made this episode because I think people online are confusing like the fitness industry and gyms in person with like the online environment. And it's just been my experience and the experience of like the lifters that I've worked with. These are just two very separate things. In my opinion, most gym environments are pretty welcoming. Um, to most people, there are exceptions to that, but there are like the online space can get pretty toxic in certain areas. There are still really great trainers, but I would say like if when people say like is fitness or gym culture toxic, online I like, yeah, I kind of get it. Like I kind of get where they're coming from, but in person in your workout, very often it's neutral, if not like good or slightly good, and people have made really good friends in the gym and like a very supportive community, and for many people like that community is what keeps them in the gym. And I'm not just talking about people who were like top athletes. Like I'm talking about like people who started training in their 40s and 50s, or people who, just want to be strong for themselves, like have found a good community and actually have like found really good friends. I found really good friends in many different gyms at this point. And so I don't want people to look at the online space and then use that to judge if the gym would be a comfortable environment for them. So I would love to know your thoughts, like genuinely, like I want to hear how your experience has been, if you think that the in-person gym experience is actually more toxic than I made it sound. I would love to hear kind of your thoughts and experience, and maybe I'll adjust my viewpoints from there. But I would say overall, I would say the in-person experience for most people is going to be a net positive, especially compared to like what sometimes the online environment can be. But yeah, thanks for listening to another episode of the Badass Lifter podcast.